believes that civilizations are collapsing in on themselves and tearing themselves apart internally for reasons that are pushed by elites and by forces which are manifest within them that will that desire. The endless atoms and causal moments in the chains may not know of that which is coming, that which is non-volitional, that which is partly pre-programmed. But he believes that these tendencies of mass servitude, mass death, mass proletarianization spiritually, mass plebeianism, mass social welfare, mass social democracy are willed, that the destructivity of prior cultural orders is willed and is definite, and certain racial groups are used to facilitate that destruction, and that other groups use them in order to achieve it. He believes in an aristocracy of man because he believes everything is hierarchical. There was an interesting moment in a by-election in East London, or Eastern London, just recently, when the chairman of the party that I used to be in a while ago was asked by a woman of Afro-Caribbean ancestry, "Are we equal with you?" And the media's there, 20 cameras are upon this individual, and therefore, given the logic and the paradigm that he is in, he said yes. He would probably want to say yes, but the media has gone on because it's got the required answer. Indeed, a lot of media investigation now is asking a politician to affirm their correctness before a prior methodological statement, and woe betide any of them if they show the slightest backsliding on any issue about which they should be progressive. Evelyn's answer, who can put words in the mouth of somebody who died a while back, but the answer of his type of thinking would be that that woman is unequal in relation to a black writer like Wole Soyinka. He's a Nigerian, he's from the Yoruba tribe, who won the Nobel Prize. Is he worthy of winning the Nobel Prize? Was he given the prize in the 1990s because it was fashionable to do? Rabindranath Tagore, the great Indian writer, and Brahmin and higher caste type won it in the 1930s. Probably wasn't too much political correctness then, but there was probably a bit even then. The Evolian answer is that she is not equal in relation to Soyinka, and Soyinka is not equal in relation to Chaucer, or Defoe, or Shakespeare, or Voltaire, or Dante, or Tolstoy, or Dostoevsky, or Wagner. That everything is unequal, and that everything is hierarchical, and that there's a hierarchy within an individual, and between groups of individuals, because everything is looking upwards, and everything has a different purpose in life. This means that those who are at the middle and at the bottom of an ethnicity, of a social order, of a gender, of a prior historical dispensation, should not be lonely in his way of looking at things, or afraid, or rebellious, or full of alienation and fear, because everyone has a role within a hierarchy, and people can move to a degree, although his viewpoint is essentially aristocratic and not meritocratic. A man like Nietzsche, who Bertrand Russell once condemned as advocating aristocracy when he was not born in it or anywhere near it, a man like him would be accepted, but never completely accepted by an aristocratic caste. Things that are regarded as hopelessly naive and snobbish now, Evelyn regards as just due form. What is the worst thing in the world at the present time, according to Sky News? Probably discrimination. Discrimination of one sort or another. Evelyn would believe that discrimination is the taxonomy of an aristocratic sensibility. One reaches for a piece of cake, one discriminates. One has an arranged marriage with another member of the Sicilian nobility, one discriminates. One reaches for a sword to do down a bounder that one wishes to be with the flat of the blade. One discriminates between the weapon and the object of the rage, which is itself indifferent, because it sees something beyond even itself. These are views, of course, which the majority of people will find cold, chilling, brutal, eagle-like, beyond almost their conception, almost forms of insanity, in actual fact, in relation to what is today regarded as normal, or moral, or even human. They are partly inhuman ideas in some ways, but they are ideas that most aristocracies and most warrior castes have had for most forms of human history. Evelyn's books are now widely available to those who wish to read them. The great conundrum of his work is, does it portend to an asceticism? In other words, if the era of destruction, which is the Kali Yuga and the ideology which he puts forward, which is the Hindu age of destruction, where everything is broken and everything is melded together prior to decomposition, which will feed a universal rebirth at a future time, because mankind is seasonal, in relation to Spengler's view of the world, where his view of history is compared to plants and botany, to give it some sort of methodology, to some sort of structure. Don't forget, these are 19th century, early 20th century ideas. No history-don, or hardly any history-don today, believes history has a meaning. Carlyle believed that the sort of deistic nature of history impinged upon the decadence of the French royalist elite, and it led to the revolution because they didn't superintend France properly. He sort of believed, in his Protestant thundering way, from the pulpit of his study in the mid-19th century, that the French Revolution was a sort of an outcome that was partly deserved by a failing aristocracy. In other words, history had a meaning, it had a purpose. Nobody believes history has a meaning or a purpose. Certain anti-fascists would say Stalingrad had a purpose, but they forget that the Red Army shot 16 to 18,000 of their own men, and they stood 18 feet behind the commissars, behind the lines. They shot an army of their own men in order to win that battle. Just as certain secret polices in the Third World cut off the ears and cut out the tongues of many retreat in battle before they send them back to their villages. Would Hitler approve of that? He would probably say, if it was done individualistically, or as a matter of revenge or of rage, it's dependent upon circumstances. But to do it in a mass-oriented way, mass camps, mass sirens, the totalitarian response, particularly of communism, the reduction of everything to the lowest common denominator, so all can be free in a sort of pig-like uniformity, he would consider that really to be death, be fought against. Hitler is extraordinarily controversial because there is an area in his thinking, particularly in relation to the Islamic world, that leads almost to the justification, as certain liberal critics say, of forms of religious terrorism. He never quite advocates that, but it's quite clear his loathing of the modern world is such, and his nuanced appreciation of the Islamic concept of jihad, where you fight within yourself against doubt and fight externally and in a quasi-pagan and masculine way against the enemy that is without you, has a resonance that chimes with certain extremist religious people who basically want to blow the modern world up. So Hitler is, as I say in my title, one of the world's most right-wing, certainly most elitist thinkers. The interesting thing about him is that everything always looks upwards, even his doctrine of race. You find in many racialistic movements a sort of socialism, that if you're of my ethnicity, you're quote-unquote all right, as if possession of a certain melanin skin content or absence of same was all that the thing was about. A sort of, when Norman Tebbit says that the British National Party is old Labour plus Powlite racialism, there is always a streak of truth to such viewpoints. Hitler doesn't believe in that. Hitler believes that race is spiritual as well as physical. If a man comes to him and says, "Oh, I'm white, you should be looking after me, mate," he would say, "What is your intellect? What is your quality? What is your moral sense? What do you know about your civilization? How far are you prepared to fight for it? What pain can you endure? Have you had understanding of death in your family, in life, mature or for a profound human being, or are you part of the limitless universality, although you were born in a particular group, which I respect and come from myself?" That's the sort of principle he would have. Now that is an attitude of revolutionary snobbery in a way, but it's snobbery based upon ideas of character. And in the end, as we know politically, character is a fundamentally important thing, and the absence of it, particularly in quasi-authoritarian movements, is poisonous, because people once in place cannot be removed, except by the most radical of means. So there is a degree to which leadership is all important. Look at an army. An army is not a gang of thugs, but it can easily become one. An army can easily become a rabble, but armies are controlled by hierarchies of force, the nature of which is partly impalpable. Each squad has a natural leader, each squad has an uncommissioned officer, each squad has an officer above them, each squad has an officer above them. In real armies, German, British armies of the past, one officer goes down, somebody replaces them from lower down, assumes immediately the responsibility that goes with that role. Even if all the officers are gone, and all the non-commissioned officers, the natural leader, the one of the 5%, most behavioural anthropologists believe that 1 in 20 of all people have leadership criteria and step forward in a moment of crisis and are looked to by the others because they provide meaning and order and hierarchy in a moment of stress. Have you ever noticed that when people undergo disaster or when they're in difficulties, they look for help, but they also look for people to lead them out of it? Leaders are never liked, because it's sort of lonely at the top. But leadership is like probably the desire to believe in something beyond yourself, is inborn. And while the principle of leadership remains, where in even democratic societies, leaders are required in order to energize the democratic masses. Don't forget, most of the Caesarisms of modernity are red forms of Caesarism, forms of extreme authoritarianism and even pitilessness, all in the name of the people, all raised in the name of the masses and their glory and their freedom, their liberty and their equality. When Forbes magazine says that the Castro's family's wealth in communist Cuba is $70 million US, when it calls them communist princes, when it's, don't forget, an ordinary man in Cuba can be imprisoned for owning his own plumbing business. When you realise that these people are princelings of reversal, you sense that some of the hierarchies, although they wear different names and different forms, are now occurring in an entropic phase or in a culture of decay, do relate to many of Evolar's ideas. He would say, even in reversal, he would say this is because these ideas are eternal and are perennial and will out in the end. The traditional political right-wing criticism of these sorts of ideas is that they're purely philosophical, they relate to individuals and their lives, they tend to Hermeticism and the ascetic view that a learned spiritual man, a man of some substance, can go off and live by himself and the rest can rot down to nothing and who cares. They say that they feed a sort of post-aristocratic misanthropy. Look at our own aristocracy. They probably lost power in about 1912. They were never shot like in the Soviet Union. They were never beheaded like in revolutionary France 200 years before. But they have lost everything in a way because their function has been taken from them, hasn't it? For those schools, the reason they were bred in the first place, the reason for all their privileges and so on has been taken away. The fascination with the Lord Lucan case in the 70s, the sort of decline of that class, you know, he listens to Hitler's speeches at Oxford, beats the nanny to death, can't even get the right woman in the basement. This sort of thing, couldn't even get that right, you know, couldn't even get the crime right, you know. It's the decline of a class, isn't it? You know, going down and knowing they've gone down as well. It's sort of Oswald Mosley, his son enjoys being dressed up as a woman and spanked, and his son's just died of a heroin overdose. And it's not, and yet Oswald Mosley is in that family chain. You don't need to really think that there is a sort of efflorescence there. It's a bit unfair on that family and so on. But don't forget, this was a class that was born to pitilessness and rule. This was a class that identified with eagles. That's why it put them on their shields and